This is the brand new HyperGo 14211, and I'm really excited about this one. And that's because at about 13.5 inches long, this is obviously direct competition for the Arrma Mojave Grom, and it actually looks really, really nice and has some stuff under the hood the Grom doesn't have. Before we dig into that though, we need to take a closer look at this body. The body comes off with 4 standard body clips. Those clips are held on with clip retainers, which is really nice to see. Obviously, this is a more simplistic system than the clipless system you see on the Mojave Grom. Whether or not you prefer this is just a personal choice. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. As you can see here, we do have 2 skid plates on the roof. Part of the rear bumper is integrated into the body, and then flipping it over, we need to unplug it because this comes with a full set of lights on the front. As you can see, the headlights look kind of like mid-2000 Bugatti headlights. And then we've got lights here in the grille as well. This should look really, really good. We'll check that out in just a few minutes. In the rear, we don't have any lights, but as you can see, this top piece of the front bumper actually latches into the bottom piece of the bumper on the chassis. We've also got a center chassis protector here, and that includes the driver figures that are inside the body. And overall, while this body does feel a little bit thin, I think it looks pretty nice. They did a good job with the color scheme, and they almost managed not to put any weird greebling on it. It does say bugs here in a couple of places, which is kind of odd. It also says angry snail on here, but that's relevant. We'll talk about that in just a second. Though other than that, it's very simple, very clean, and looks really good. Underneath that is an updated version of their 1/12, 1/14 scale chassis. This is a solid aluminum plate chassis. This aluminum plate is about 3 millimeters thick, which is pretty thick for a small car like this. And of course, this chassis design is completely different to what you're going to see on something like the Mojave Grom, which is an all plastic chassis. Whether or not you think that's an advantage, again, is a personal preference. I know a lot of people do like an aluminum chassis though, and this one seems pretty nice. The wheelbase on this car is just a little bit longer than on the Mojave Grom, but not long enough to really make much of a difference. These wheels and tires do look brand new. Overall, they seem to be pretty nice. They're a little bit harder than I would expect them to be. The rubber compound isn't crazy hard, but it's definitely not soft. I expect this is going to slide around pretty good off-road, which is probably what they're going for. These do have foams in them. And if we compare them to a Mojave Grom wheel and tire, you can see they're almost identical in diameter and width. The wheels are a little bit bigger on the MJX, and they both have 12 millimeter hexes, though the Mojave Grom tire does not have foam in it. I'm not really sure at this size if having foam's an advantage, especially with how stiff this tire is. If it turns out we don't like these wheels and tires, maybe we'll try these in a little bit. Like a lot of HyperGo cars, you do get 2 sets of wheels and tires with this. However, in this case, it looks like the tires are identical and it's just the wheel color that's different. That's nice for styling, and it's cool to have an extra set of tires, but I would have liked to have seen something with a different tread pattern on it so that we can get a different driving experience by switching the tires out. Some of you guys might not know this, but I hide giveaways in a lot of my videos. I don't announce them in the title or thumbnail, and I announce the winner in a community post, so if you want to make sure you don't miss winning something really, really cool, make sure you hit that bell to get notified of all posts and videos, as sometimes we give away some pretty neat stuff. Now, speaking of neat stuff, there's a lot going on with this car, including some things, like I said, you don't get on the Mojave Grom. First thing I want to take a look at is this battery. This is a 2S 3000 milliamp hour 25C Angry Snail battery. From what I've seen, the Angry Snail moniker differentiates between their lithium polymer and lithium ion batteries. As you can see, this is a 2000 milliamp hour 3S lithium ion battery, and it doesn't say Angry Snail on it. So these probably have a bit more jam. To see just how much jam it has, we're going to be using our LiPo dyno. This thing gives us a very accurate ESR measurement, which is the internal resistance of the battery. It's not a perfect indicator of performance, but it is one indicator of performance. HyperGo are claiming a 25C battery here, which is pretty conservative. And taking a look, you can see we're getting a true 23C here, which is very close to their claim, which means we can put HyperGo along with Traxxas in being fairly accurate with their claims and being probably the only 2 manufacturers that are when it comes to C rating. I've had several of these Angry Snail batteries in the past, and so far I've had really good luck with them. By the way, if you like stuff like this, make sure you hang out because this isn't the only dyno we're going to be using today. That battery is going to be powering the car through a genuine AMAS Deans style connector. These high quality Deans connectors actually can handle quite a bit of current, and these types of connectors generally get a bad name because there's a ton of really cheap clones out there. This is not one of those. Control is going to be going through a new style of receiver. You can see this receiver isn't in a receiver box, and based on everything I can see, they're not claiming this to be waterproof, though we'll definitely take a closer look at this receiver to see if they've tried to make it water resistant at all. To go along with that receiver, HyperGo have finally updated their transmitter. This thing definitely feels better in the hand than their old old style. Everything just feels a little bit more high quality. The buttons and switches are underneath a lid, which you may or may not like, though the lid itself is satisfying to open and close. And you've got all the normal buttons, switches, and dials you'd expect on here. That's all going to be to control this new 45 amp ESC. HyperGo are claiming this thing's going to be more responsive and have more power than their older style. You can differentiate it from their old style because it has this separate power button and set button. It's held down to the chassis by 3 screws. To get to those screws, we need to take this center brace out of here, and hopefully that's not going to be too difficult. And no, removing this screw is no problem whatsoever because they have pre-applied thread lock. As far as I know, Traxxas is the only other brand that uses this pre-applied thread lock, and it's really cool because we get the exact amount we want, meaning that the screws will stay in, but they won't be hard to remove. We're also going to need to remove this shock tower, but before we do that, I want to take a look at this front bumper. This is a new front bumper. It attaches here at the bottom of the chassis and then has a plate that goes up to the shock tower. The bumper itself doesn't have a lot of give to it, but it's also going to be partially integrated into the body, and it is reasonably soft, so I think this will do a good job of protecting things. One thing you're going to notice is that most of the screws on this are 1.5 millimeter headed. They're a combination of self-tappers and machine screws. These more coarse thread screws are called self-tappers, though even the machine screws will self-tap. It's just the name these are known by, so that's what I call them. This is a serious disadvantage when contrasted to the Arrma Grom line. The Arrma Groms use almost entirely 2 millimeter headed screws, and they are much harder to strip out. If you're going to be working on something like this, I highly recommend getting some MIP bits. Being careful and using really good quality bits will hopefully prevent you from stripping these out, though it's still fairly easy to do. These little shock towers are fairly simple and very flexible. I don't expect to have any problems with them. Though I will say, unlike most HyperGo cars, you don't get a huge bag of spare parts. With this, you get a little charger, a screwdriver, a 4-way wrench, and a couple of Allen keys. One thing I want to mention about this is I don't really trust these chargers that much. Your charger is solely responsible for making sure your battery doesn't blow up during charging by overcharging it, charging it too quickly, or doing something else strange. And not only do these chargers not allow you to monitor what's going on, but they're generally fairly low quality. And whereas I've personally never had a problem with one, I do usually test them when I run these cars. I still think a higher quality charger is worthwhile to buy if you're going to run something like this. HyperGo have put the rear bumper in the way of this screw to get the center brace out, so we are going to have to remove this. This rear bumper also looks really nice. It is obviously unique to this car. It includes a little wheelie bar. Whether or not that's going to be necessary depends on just how powerful this thing is and how much traction those tires get. By the way, we are going to try this on 3S, assuming it survives 2S, because this ESC is 3S compatible. But for now, we need to get this out of the way. And as you can see there, I started stripping that screw out because I'm coming in at a little bit of an angle, so we do need to remove the back of the bumper first. And that really is the main disadvantage of those little headed screws. You just can't get away with much. I wasn't at much of an angle there, and I still could not get that out. Of course, the answer to that is just don't try to take them out at an angle, but people do stuff they're not supposed to do all the time. Looking at the plastic of this bumper, it feels very high quality. There's just a feel to some plastics, and you can tell if they feel cheap or good, and this is nice and squishy without feeling super cheap. I'm guessing this is going to be a pretty durable part. And just like on the front, we've got that pre-applied thread locker. Awesome stuff to see. Now, removing this brace does give us access to the ESC, but I want to take a look at another feature first. And that's going to be this little gyro. This isn't the first time we've seen a gyro on a HyperGo car, but basically this sits in line between the servo and the receiver, and it's a very simple thing to adjust. If you want more gyro, you turn the knob up. If you want less gyro, you turn the knob down. Again, has its advantages and disadvantages, but it's a very simple system and does seem to work pretty well. I do like to see that this ESC is screwed down and not double-side taped down. That makes maintenance a lot easier. As you can see, it looks like we've got a standard 25mm fan here, and it's got a P on it for power. I don't know what it stands for. But what it does have is some clips on the side, so we can take it further apart. Okay, so I broke one of my clips off, and it still wouldn't come apart, which means this is actually glued together, and these clips are probably just to hold it together while the glue dries during manufacturing. The downside to that is you can't easily get this fan out of here. Obviously, there will be other solutions if you need to replace the fan, but I'd really like to see some option to get the fan out of here because these do break and it's a fairly common problem. That ESC is going to be powering this fairly large brushless motor, and that's where our new toy is going to come into play. While this isn't actually a dyno, this is a brushless motor analyzer, and it's going to allow us to find out if they're telling the truth about the specs on this motor. And removing this motor, you can see that we have a steel pinion gear, as well as a metal motor mount. I don't think that's a steel motor mount. I stand corrected, that is a steel motor mount. That's going to be driving a steel spur gear out to a steel drivetrain, which we'll look at in just a minute. But first, we've got a new toy to play with. This motor analyzer is going to allow us to determine kV of the motor and a few other things. With a censored motor, we'd get more information, but it'll still be fun to check this out. As you can see, this is claimed to be 4400 kV. Let's see what it really is. Most modern motors are going to be 4-pole, so we need to set that. And then we should be able to go in here to kV RPM and fire this up. At full throttle, we are getting 33,000 RPM and right at 4,400 kV, just like it says. If you have adjustable motor timing, you can also use this to adjust that accurately. We can check noise level. I have no idea what that means. Like I said, if we had a censored motor, we could do more with it, but being able to check the kV is nice, and this allows us to test motors without hooking it to an ESC. This is going to be a handy tool to have. HyperGo have rated this at 2 and 3S, though at 4,400 kV, it's going to be pretty spicy on 3S. Hopefully this heatsink and fan will be enough to keep it cool, but we'll find out about that in just a few minutes. Before we do that, though, we need to take a look at what else you get with this car, and you get quite a bit. As you can see here, we have a steel spur gear, a steel center drive shaft with a bearing support in the middle, and that spur gear is running out to these nice bevel gear differentials. A lot of this is very similar to what you're going to get in the 223S version of the Mojave Grom, but of course there are quite a few differences, such as these universal joint axles. These are pretty different from the CVDs you get in the Grom. I will say I've personally had mixed results with these kinds of axles in the past. They've been sold in the aftermarket for a while, and usually they aren't that great, though these do seem to be made better than I've seen before. These universal joint style axles are actually really interesting because of their geometry. As the universal joints get at more of an angle, it actually makes the centerpiece speed up and slow down as it's rotated. And this is why a universal joint system has to be in phase, meaning that the universal joint here and the universal joint here are in alignment with each other. That way only the middle part speeds up and slows down as it rotates. If you've got one end at one angle and the other end at another angle, the entire axle, including the wheel and tire, will speed up and slow down, introducing some vibration. Likewise, if they're out of phase with each other, you're going to get vibration. Interestingly, a CVA or CVD that you get in an RC car also isn't constant velocity. This design looks very different from a universal joint, but functionally it operates almost exactly the same. And this end really doesn't have any constant velocity because it's only a single joint. And again, while this end looks different, it operates basically the same way from a physics standpoint. Fortunately, in these little RC cars, it doesn't make that much difference because these things vibrate and rattle all over the place anyway, and a little bit of extra vibration probably isn't going to hurt anything. I'm definitely curious to see how these things hold up to some serious power, and I'm also curious to see how these are going to hold up. Now, these are steel, though they are sintered steel. As you can see, they do attract a magnet, but instead of being machined out of a solid billet, these are made out of powder that's pressed together and then heated until the grain structure grows into a solid piece. Sometimes there's some finishing machining done on them, but not always. You can usually tell a sintered steel piece from a machined steel piece, primarily because it doesn't have a bunch of machining marks all over it, though that's not always the best way. A lot of times, though, you'll have really smooth corners and even see draft angles because these do have to come out of a mold, and there are certain considerations that have to be taken into account when doing so. Inside this differential, you can see we do have a gasket here, which means this is a sealed differential, so you could run diff fluid in it if you wanted to. Though, as you can see here, this is grease-filled, though these are, again, sintered steel gears. And overall, this is a fairly decent-looking differential, and I would say fairly comparable to what you see on the 223S Mojave Grom. Putting this back together, I noticed one interesting design element. Half of the inner support for the bearing is on the differential, and the other half's actually on the axle. That sandwiches the bearing in place. I'm not really sure if there's any advantage to that, but it is something I've never seen on any other car before, so I thought it was worth pointing out. The shocks on these are fluid filled and they're fairly generic. There's nothing really special about them. In my experience, they're reasonably durable. We do have threaded plastic bodies with aluminum caps and aluminum bottom caps. I haven't really noticed these leaking and they feel reasonably filled with fluid. Overall, for what this is, seems like a decent shock. These are going to be bladder style shocks. As you can see, there's no bleeder screw in the top. I'm definitely curious to see how these make this car handle, as the Mojave Grom is one of the best handling little cars I've ever had, and this thing's going to have to handle pretty well if it wants to compete. Controlling that handling is a fairly basic set of plastic arms. These are pretty flexible. The hubs have shielded bearings in them. Those are attached to the chassis with cast zinc or aluminum D-blocks. I believe it just goes into plastic in the front. The reason they can get away with this is because most hits these cars are going to take are from the outside, and that puts the most force on the D-block, not the C-block. We see this on other cars as well, so it's not really unusual. Moving back up to the front, we can see something I'm really excited about, and that's an aluminum steering rack. The steering on this platform's always been a little bit iffy, and running high power power, these things tend to lose control pretty easily. I'm hoping having a more positive steering rack is going to help that, and also hopefully helping with that is this updated steering servo. Hypergo also recently updated another car that could be a direct competition to the Mini XRT. Let me know down in the comments if you want to see a comparison between those two, and make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it. There might be a giveaway in that video. Now, pulling this servo out, we can see it's a pretty generic looking unit. It doesn't have any labeling on it. You can see that the servo saver is built into the servo horn, but you can see that the output of the servo is steel. We'll dig deeper into this servo in that comparison video I just mentioned, but for now, let me get all this put back together and let's see just how much of a competitor to the Mojave Grom this thing is. As I was putting this back together, I took a closer look at the receiver and especially the gyro, and I don't think that this car will actually be waterproof. I can't get into this because it's glued, but I didn't see any conformal coating on the circuit boards, though this guard on the body will probably protect them from splashes somewhat, but I wouldn't want to submerge this, at least not without waterproofing those two parts. With that being said, let's go take this thing out and see what it can do. Okay guys, we've got a fully charged 2S battery in here, and I think this is with the ESC unlocked. I couldn't really figure out how to unlock it. The 5-button push thing didn't work, so I think it comes out of the box unlocked, unlike the old ESC did, and it feels pretty decent on 2S. Actually, it handles pretty darn well for how small it is, and we're getting a reasonable amount of speed out of it. I can feel that gyro working. Let's get one more pass out of it. It feels nice and stable. Overall, I'm pretty impressed with it. Those hard tires seem to get decent traction on this surface. One more pass. All right, let's see what we got. Okay, 33 miles an hour on 2S, that's not bad. We're gonna test it on 3S, but for now, let's see how it bashes stock. First of all, on concrete, it feels pretty darn good. You can definitely have fun doing some skids, burning some donuts. As you can see, I'm leaving some tread behind here, and this actually is better than I expected it to be. It's not the fastest thing in the world, and it's not the most powerful thing in the world, but it is very controllable and feels pretty good, but that's not what this thing's made for. This thing's made for the dirt. There we go, this should be its natural environment. And yeah, on this kind of surface, it also feels really nice. Those lights are bright enough that you can see them in the daytime, and I think they look really cool on the front of this car. I'm not usually a huge fan of lights on cars, especially if you have to pay extra for them, but as a little freebie bonus on this car, they actually seem pretty nice, and they're bright enough to where they aren't just a useless accessory. And so far, like I said, this thing feels reasonably good on dirt. There are some pretty big rocks out here and some pretty deep sand that it does tend to get stuck in, but overall, it seems to be handling it pretty well. As long as you keep your speed up and don't do something like that, it's not bad. This is some pretty soft, heavily rutted construction site dirt. And not only does it look pretty scale going over it, but again, as long as you keep that speed up, it handles it nicely. And I'm actually really impressed with these tires. They're doing well in a variety of terrains. It does seem to like this compacted clay a bit more, and with that gyro running, sliding around and getting some good scale action is actually very, very easy, and easier than I thought it would be. These Hypergo cars aren't best known for their handling, but this one kind of breaks that mold, and I'm really satisfied with it. Is it quite as good as the Mojave Grom? I'm not sure. I honestly think this gyro might work better. I think the ESC has a lot better responsiveness than the old ESC. There were a lot of complaints about the old ESC transmitter and receiver having a bit of lag. I'm not really feeling any lag in this whatsoever. It feels really good, really tight, and really responsive. The transmitter itself doesn't feel the best in my hand, but that's going to be something that's subjective based on what size your hands are and what you think feels comfortable. Overall, it's not bad though. And I will say, I think this thing actually handles on concrete better than it does off-road. And these little bashers are going to be used on concrete a lot, so that's probably not a bad thing. I do want to see how it's going to handle some really rough stuff though, so let's run it through something it's really not designed for and see how it handles it. You know, that wasn't too bad. It rolled over, but ended up back on its wheels, though it is stuck again. Nope, we got going, that's awesome. All right, let's run it back. Oh, she flipped. Moving over to this pile of gravel, even though the gravel's probably 2 feet tall in scale compared to this car, it does seem to do a decent job with it. Again, those tires seem to work pretty well. Obviously, this is all very rough for this little car, but I am impressed with how it's handling it. Let's go see how it handles a bit more power. And for a bit more power, we're going to be using this 3S 2200 pack. This is a pretty old pack, but it still has a decent amount of jam left in it, and it should get us going a little bit faster in this HyperGo 14211. Let's go find out. All right, 3S is where we usually run into handling trouble on these HyperGo cars. Let's see how this one does. It feels pretty stable so far. Let's get her up to full throttle here. Full throttle. It actually feels pretty stable. Not quite as fast as I was hoping it would be, but it still feels pretty fast. Full throttle. That's pretty good. Let's get one more pass out of her. Full throttle. All right, let's see what we got. 43 miles an hour, that's pretty good. Let's see how durable it is. Now this is some nice, fresh cut grass, and I think this thing's gonna be able to handle it pretty well. So far, it doesn't seem too bad. It's obviously a little bit deeper again than you would probably want for a car like this, but actually I'm pretty impressed. Let's see if it'll do a jump off the big ramp. Oh yeah. Now air control is definitely not going to be the strong suit of this, with quite a bit of mass for its size and fairly small tires, but still it handled it pretty well, and it just landed that jump very flat, and that was a pretty big jump for this little car. Let's see how it handles when it doesn't land flat. That was a decent little crash, but we can do better than that. The gyro's really putting in good work here. There's quite a few sticks and a lot of rough terrain here, but it's still pretty controllable. Landed on power there, testing out those axle shafts. So far, so good. Obviously, we're not doing skate park level work here, but this is probably pretty comparable to what you'd be doing with it, and that's what I like to test. For this rougher terrain, it definitely seems to be liking that 3S power. I'm not really getting on it full power, but I do like this 3S better than 2S. Backflip. Oh, almost. Not quite. Oh, I think we might have broken it. Nope, just a stick stuck in it. Let's see if we can't get a little bit more speed and maybe a full backflip out of her. Here we go. Oh, nope, got knocked out of the way by a stick. That's the problem with this kind of terrain. You're gonna get bounced around a lot. Nope, no backflip. And that's not a surprise with this kind of car. These desert off-road trucks are not designed for stunts like that. You need big tires and a lot of rotational inertia in order to get the thing to rotate around like that. But for what this thing is designed for, and that's blasting around, it does pretty well. And again, this terrain is really not what this is designed for, and it seems to be handling it fairly well. It's not getting all packed up with sticks. Sometimes these small cars can really get bound up with sticks and leaves and stuff, and this one doesn't seem to do it. All right, let me focus and see if we can't get one more big jump out of her. There we go. Oh. So there we go, guys. Off camera, I did have quite a few more bad wrecks like that, and overall it held up really, really well. I did get some sticks and rocks and whatnot stuck in the tires and in the suspension, but other than that, it really didn't break anything, and I'm pretty impressed with it, especially for the price. This thing, brushless, with a 2S battery and the charger, is going to be between $160 and $170. At the time of this recording, it's not actually available yet, but it should be available very soon. Given that the equivalent Mojave Grom is $270, I think this thing represents a pretty good deal. Is it as well built as a Mojave Grom? No. Is it as easy to work on as a Mojave Grom? No. Is parts availability as guaranteed? No. Are there going to be as many upgrades available? No. However, this is on a platform that's been around for a while, so a lot of parts should be available for a long time, and there are some upgrades available for it. And for quite a bit less than the Mojave Grom, you're getting most of the experience. I think it'd be nice if this thing was waterproof. I feel like pretty much any modern basher should be waterproof, but if you're in an area that doesn't get wet a lot and you don't like washing your cars, that might not be important to you. Overall though, guys, I think this is a great little car, and it comes in at a great price. Whereas I don't think it's quite as good as the Mojave Grom, it's also $100 cheaper. The last thing I want to say is I was really impressed with how this thing handled, not from a general handling standpoint, but from a HyperGo high power handling standpoint. HyperGo cars tend to be pretty hard to control at high speed, and this one actually does a pretty good job. How much of that is the gyro? How much of that is the updated steering system? I'm not sure, but it does handle pretty well. And overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm really happy you joined me in this video, and I'd love for you to join me in one of these videos.